in the midst of life, in the midst of the everyday, in the midst of the hustle and bustle that we're used to, in the midst of the headlines, in the midst of those in power, rulers, legislators, religious leaders, in the midst of that stuff of life, here comes one who prepares the way. Yes, prepares the way. Because in the midst of that life, in the midst of the everyday, in the midst of where we find ourselves located, there is a need for something different. You know that feeling. When you look at the headlines and you sense that something could be better in the world. Not just in your life, but in the life of your neighbor. Not just in your home, but in your neighborhood, in your city, in your community, in the world. You know that hunger and that need. And so in the midst of what seems overwhelming, the text today reminds us that there is one who comes to prepare the way for something different. Now, this one who comes with a difficult to hear message. This one who comes to tell us some things that many of us might not want to hear. In fact, we must be careful if we say we want to hear it, because our hearts might not be prepared for what this preparer of the way has to say. And at the cornerstone, at the center of what he wants to say is a call to each of us, all of us, for transformation. Total change, a beautiful Greek word, metanoia. Not just a change in how we think, but a change in how we behave, act, and enter into the world. A transformation about the ways we look at ourselves and our neighbor and our communities. A transformation in the ways in which we enter spaces and in the way we evaluate what's happening around us. This kind of transformation requires each of us to be willing to be transformed. See, this transformation, this change, this metanoia that we read about today is made possible by the Spirit of the living God, yes. But we must accept it. We must embrace it. We must be willing to allow for that transformation to occur. And when we do, we begin to see the world around us in a different way. For those who first heard this text, they began to become more aware of the hunger and need among their neighbor. That these folks who were in power during the season, these folks that could have made life better for them were not doing so. These folks in power were benefiting themselves extremely well. Yes, the religious leaders, yes, the political leaders, yes, the community leaders, they were doing things that really benefited them and enriched them and made their lives better. But in the meantime, everywhere around them, there was chaos and hunger and struggle and strife. So this metanoia of the Spirit, this change of heart and life that the Spirit brought about through this messenger of the way, transformed the way that these folk saw everything around them. There was a new sensitivity in their bones for what they saw. And then this preparer of the way calls all of us to do something actually astounding. Because this metanoia that God creates in us and makes possible in our bones connects us to one another and then sends us into the world in a new way. We participating in what God is up to in the world. And what is God up to? Well, the ancient prophet tells us. And so this text today calls us to remember Isaiah the prophet, who said that one would come to make a highway into new life, to make a highway home. So the mountains are brought low and the valleys are brought up, and the paths that don't seem to go anywhere are made straight, and the rocky places are made smooth. Everything that can get in the way for home and for new life and for new possibility and for transformation and for freedom for all people, anything that can get in the way for this healing and salvation and wholeness is smoothed out. The way made plain for all people. Can you imagine that reality? All those moments where we look at the newspaper and wonder and say, well, it won't be possible to solve this. All those hungers and all that strife and all that violence and all that heartbreak that we see around us. And we say, well, it breaks my heart, but there's no way. The prophet reminds us that there will be a way. John the Baptizer reminding us that we can participate in the making of this way by the power of the Spirit that changes, transforms, and converts all of us into a new way of thinking and being in the world. So in this season, we're wondering, what does love look like? Oh, see, love prepares the way. Love welcomes the metanoia of the Spirit and allows all of us to enter into partnership with a God who's making the way. Love looks like this, making sure that mountains are brought low and valleys are lifted up, and the paths that don't seem certain are made straight, and the rocky paths are made smooth. Love looks like this. Are we willing to participate in that love? Are we willing to come alongside of God who's making all things new? Are we willing to allow the Spirit of the living God to give us the transformation that we so desperately need so that our eyesight is transformed and we begin to reach out in kinship and connection and community? We together preparing the way for a God who cannot wait to save the world. Love looks like this. Are you ready to go on that journey? Amen.